Welcome back to the Never Board of Trade podcast. This is episode in the 20s somewhere now. I think episode 21.
I think 20.
But most significantly, the first episode of 2026.
Yeah.
So Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
I'm Jaipaul. If this is your first year on the Never Board of Trade podcast, I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay. Yeah.
And we work at the Brampton Board of Trade, and we appreciate you listening in with us.
Yeah. How were your holidays?
Restful.
Good.
I had went into the holidays with some real intention to get a whole bunch of work done while the office was closed and while I felt like I was going to be accountable to nobody, only to realize being accountable to nobody meant I was going to sleep and watch a lot of Netflix.
Nice, yeah.
And so I thought I'd get a lot done. I'm actually very stressed this week because all the stuff I thought I would do to close out 2025 has now crept into 2026. But it was a good holiday. Lots of family time, lots of eating, all the good stuff.
No, I think we all deserved some rest. And
I think so. You went away.
I did go away. I went to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And it was great because it was warmer than here. And even though it was raining all the time, but that's fine. And just, again, a lot of rest, a lot of family time.
Yeah.
A lot of eating, which is great, and I appreciate a slow pace and some time for reflection. So that's good.
And you were right; the whole team needed it. I think, as I was sharing when we reconnect on Monday, I think this was the first time that 2 weeks or so that we were apart over the holidays that I saw nobody log into
nobody was
our Teams chat. No one wished each other Merry Christmas. No, we had one of the members of the team had a birthday. No one even said anything about her birthday, and I took all that as good because I'm not worried that this team doesn't care about each other.
Yeah.
It was just so clear that we all just needed a bit of a break from the work and consequently a little bit of a break from each other. So I'm really glad everybody got it here.
A little bit of analog connection as opposed to digital. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
But the world kept moving even while we were off, and we got a couple things I think we can talk about
for sure
to get the year started, including a couple things that have happened in the last week or so.
Yeah.
And then maybe a little bit about, we've had a few meetings already, both as a team and you with your policy committee and so forth, about what's coming up in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a busy few weeks.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we always like to take the big picture and make it somewhat local. So we'll figure out a way to make this a local story. Yeah. But I think the story that you have to talk about, because it's just the news this week,
hot off the press,
is Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah.
And depending on your perspective, either being kidnapped by the U.S. government or the people of Venezuela being liberated by the U.S. government. But it's a crazy week to think that these are the things, this is the world we live in right now. And very much feels like a weird history repeating itself when you think about the U.S. relationship with Central America in general.
Yeah.
We've seen this story before. We've seen this play before. What do you think? Because this was, I've been actually meaning to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
And I purposely been refraining from asking you until we were on the microphones.
Yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated Daniel Tish's comments on LinkedIn. I maybe Josh can edit that in afterwards, but I thought it was a very measured take.
Yeah.
Because the thing that I think that the takes on the extremes or the polar opposite takes are both takes I disagree with. So,
and we were talking about Carney and Polyev, or are you talking about the U.S. and?
I'm talking about the view that this was a needed and
I see.
Worthy of celebration, right? Yeah. That this operation was worthy of celebration, and then the take that that mistakes Maduro as some sort of humanitarian kind of leader, and that that change wasn't inevitable, and that something
that this was the only recourse.
Exactly. Yeah. So both of those takes, I don't have a home on either side.
Yeah.
I think I just feel like weird and icky about this a little bit, and it feels like the abrogation of international law is just par for the course.
Yeah.
In a year that was marked by a genocide in Gaza and Russia looking to take over Ukraine and if now with Trump and his sort of manifest destiny with Canada, but also Greenland and Venezuela and maybe even Colombia and Mexico, it just feels like we are moving towards a multipolar world, and maybe we're already there, and we're just waiting for China to now take Taiwan.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to feel a little bit numb to all of this. I find folks who are older than me are appealing to the UN and the rules-based trading order and all of these things, and people my age just we don't believe in that anymore.
Yeah.
Like this is all kind of nostalgic.
Yeah.
A little bit. So I feel weird about all of this, and I don't know. I can't help but think where does Canada stand? Prime Minister Carney is traveling to China.
Yeah.
Which is major, right? Alberta specializes and is frankly exporting, I think, just about the same amount or even more oil than Venezuela is, and the nature of the oil is very similar to Venezuelan oil. What does that mean for the refineries in the U.S. that are specialized for refining this kind of oil?
Yeah.
Do we look at other markets? And if we look at other markets, China's kind of the only other market, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, a lot of questions. What do you think?
I'm not sure either. I think there's a lot of different takes you can have on this. And for the record, as someone who is older than you, I've similarly lost any faith in the rules-based order of the United Nations and other such mechanisms as well. But no, I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. Is this the first pebble in a broader destabilization of places like Cuba and other nations within Central America?
Yeah. Cuba as well.
So we know that there are other. This is not a simple matter. This is not a matter simply about Venezuela. Is this a piece here around our oil and energy markets and our ability to fulfill them, and if the U.S. now has control over the Venezuelan oil reserves? Like, to me, it's not simply a matter of what they did in terms of removing Maduro. It's the fact that they have now ensconced themselves as de facto running that country and therefore that economy for the foreseeable future. And in as much as there's some talk of, they seem to be backing off slightly in how strongly they're wording that, they're making it clear that they are the security operation within that country, and therefore are going to have an outsized say in how that economy works for some time.
Yeah, they're the interim government.
And what does interim mean in this case, right? Like, interim does not mean a few weeks. It doesn't even mean a few months. The Maduro court case, if nothing else, probably would take years to litigate, let alone establishing some kind of new government and regime in there with any kind of stability. So the U.S. for the foreseeable has control of Venezuela and will run Venezuela as they see fit.
And exactly that. The reason I can't find myself celebrating something like this is we've seen this playbook before, right? People, I want to respect that there are a number of Venezuelan people, especially diaspora, who found that both the Chavez and in some ways even more so with the Maduro regime, that the transgression of human rights and all of these things are very real, and folks are celebrating the fact that this individual is no longer in power. But people celebrated when Bashar al-Assad fled the country. People celebrated when Saddam Hussein was ousted. I think the celebratory impulse is understandable, but it's not. I don't think is the basis for decision making when it comes to should we topple this regime, right? There are the implications of a power vacuum, of the FARC in Colombia and other insurgency groups coming in, like ISIS with Iraq. This leads to protracted crises and winning wars of attrition. In the case of Vietnam, it doesn't usually lead to a good outcome.
And I would actually, if the one thing I'd push back on you there, it's not winning wars of attrition; it's waging wars of attrition. These wars are seldom won.
Exactly.
There comes a point where either that party who has established themselves there or who has imposed themselves there either has extracted all the value they want out of that region and has moved on, or that region or that country no longer serves a political need for that regime, and then they move on. But those wars are not won. They're waged endlessly until there's such point that the party leaves because they just can't get what they want out of it anymore. So this is a potentially ugly situation. So there's that part of it, and I agree with you. I think it's important to state that no one here is saying Maduro deserved to continue to be leader of Venezuela.
No.
What we're talking about here is how he was removed and what's going to happen next. And part of my concern is there, and that piece around the oil piece for Canada I see it, and you're not wrong to say, I think there's a real timeliness to why the Prime Minister is going to China right now.
Yeah,
that is our biggest market opportunity for Canadian oil. I do think, for what it's worth, however, I don't think that we're not as vulnerable as it may seem. Oil from Venezuela still has to be shipped from Venezuela to the United States. We have established pipelines from Alberta and from Western Canada into the United States. We still have the means to provide supply and distribute in a way that won't be easily replaced from Venezuela. I think in the long run, anyone who's suggesting that this puts Canadian oil industry in a vulnerable position is absolutely right. But I think that's more of a long-term play.
Yeah, you're right, and it's
than
mostly
a short-term play.
Mostly the coastal, the Gulf coastal refineries
That's right.
as well.
That's right. This is not oil that's going to end up in Montana.
No, exactly.
For instance, right? So it's not like our industry is completely exposed as a result of that.
Yeah.
This just speaks to the ongoing conversation we've been having for very, very acutely for a year, but for many, many years, about the need for Canadian businesses to diversify beyond the United States. Yeah. And this Trump regime has given us every reason to believe that and continue in that direction, because they only reinforce it, whether it be through tariff or whether it be through their hostile actions in other countries now to replace potentially us as a supplier for key commodities. The piece that I wanted to run by you, and I'm curious about what your thoughts are here.
Okay.
This is a United States now that seems like, depending on your point of view, is either without any limits or is at least testing the limits of what their power is and trying to understand at what point the rest of the world will say anything and can the rest of the world even do anything. Yeah. And so we've seen the rhetoric around Greenland has come back again now. We've seen that they've just gone in and taken out somebody who they don't is an inconvenience to them. Yeah. Because make no mistake, there was this regardless of what this means to Venezuelan people, for the United States government, this is all about access to oil reserves. This has nothing to do with spreading democracy. No. So at what point if one wanted to go there, does the United States decide, we'd really like that. It's a really nice fresh water you got there, Canada. Yeah. Shame if somebody did something about that. Are we now on notice as Canadians as far as our own domestic security goes, if the Americans have determined that, or demonstrated that they're perfectly comfortable just taking what they want from anyone that they feel can't stand up to them? Yeah.
This is
or am I just being crazy?
No, this is the question. I think people have been saying that in the neoconservative era, Bush would have at least made up a lie around weapons of mass destruction.
That's right. We're not even pretending anymore.
There's no veil of decency anymore. So it is kind of surreal to sort of be witnessing the brazen kind of rapacity of the Trump administration. And I think my view on this is, we saw in Minneapolis, like ICE unilaterally killing citizens who are unarmed. Yeah. Right. Like, this is essentially Gestapo. Like, it's the U.S. is in this inexorable march towards fascism, if not already there. Yeah. Right. And I think this manifest destiny piece is part of this colonial
he's
mindset.
Brushed off the Monroe Doctrine. They deserve to run the Western Hemisphere.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when it comes to freshwater, I was chatting with a friend about this, but he was saying, because I brought this up, and he was saying the saving grace is the U.S. has become over the years increasingly incompetent at building infrastructure, and they can't even build high-speed rail in California, and China is building 35.
They opened one right now.
Right now, exactly, and another one in 30 seconds from now. But the amount of infrastructure that would be required to actually siphon fresh water into the U.S. So I mean, maybe that might be the saving grace. But I also think, I'm of Guyanese descent. Venezuela last year made a play at a major part of Guyana. Yeah. Because they have oil on their shore, and I think when I think about what's the implication on Guyana now that the U.S. has effective control over 13% of the proven oil reserves, right? It is when I think about it, I think as long as countries play nice, I think their sovereignty is more or less intact. I know we've heard about the 51st state and all of that, and I don't think we're entirely in the clear, but I also think a lot of that is all talk, because we still have 85% of our trade is tariff free, right? Yeah. And I think what we're moving towards is not a system where the U.S. owns everybody, right? We're headed towards a system where China has its sphere of control, Russia has its own sphere of control, and the U.S. has its own sphere of control, and that control also means sovereign nations that are essentially subservient to the U.S. And I think we have to make a choice about which master are we going to serve. And that sounds really depressing, but I think that's where we're at.
Yeah. So when you say play nice, what you really mean then is you hit it your final comment there. Yeah. It means being subservient to the U.S. When we say play nice, we mean play nice by their rules.
Yes. Yes.
So what options do we have here? Do we have any? Like, do we share a border with Denmark? Does that qualify us to join the EU? Is this the next play here? Does Canada have to go find other, not just trade partners, but partners in the form of security and in the form of numbers, quite frankly, to be able to stand up to the United States, or is the EU just similarly going to have to fall in line as well in your mind?
Honestly, I think the EU is interesting because it has its own power to dictate sort of global standards in these things.
Yeah, the EU thing is tricky. Yeah. If you join the EU, then as a business organization, then we have a whole red tape conversation we definitely need to have.
100%.
For instance,
yes.
But we're talking about security now, not totally. Regulation.
In all honesty, I unfortunately don't see a path forward that isn't fundamentally American. I think the only thing we can really hope for is that there is we return to a level of decency. Right now, we're in this sort of very tumultuous interregnum, if you will, between world orders, and we just have to hope for getting to decency as quickly as possible. And what does decency mean? I think there are customs and mannerism, like a set of politeness, right? That democracy entails. That have been abrogated because of a particular administration, and I think we just have to get back to new norms. Right.
And it's funny you said that when you were searching for your words there. I was going to say the term I've used is the norms. We've abandoned all the norms of democracy, of statecraft, of just decency in terms of how nations and peoples even within those nations interact with one another. And it's in the abandonment of those norms, I think, that we're seeing so much of the tension and so much of the exploitation, quite frankly, by certain powers as a result. Because while everyone else is standing around suggesting we should play politely and be nice to one another, they're able to just, because there's an understanding that we would abide by those norms. Certain countries like the United States, and the way we looked at regimes like that in Russia are just going and grabbing what they want. And no one is suggesting what they're doing is right.
For sure.
It's just contrary, but it is. But everyone just assumed that the understanding of how the world worked would have prevented the type of action that they're taking.
Exactly. The word that I wanted to use, but I figured it was too political sciencey, is forbearance. This is the term that in why democracies fall is it's this idea that it doesn't have to be explicitly written down or legislated. It's a custom, it's a norm that we maintain because this is essential to the architecture and the infrastructure of democracy. And right now, it seems like we're willing to throw out the playbook, and not just in the U.S. but around the world. And I think we need to get to a place. The reason why people feel so uncertain and anxious right now is there isn't this sense of stability, right, that comes with democracy, forbearance, and a world order. Right. But once we figure out what those new norms are, I hope that leads to some quelling of anxiety, so to speak.
Well, let's see what happens in the coming weeks. I think this is going to be very, very interesting for Canada to figure out what they're going to do. I thought it was it caught my attention that the Prime Minister, they definitely worked on his comments quite long, because he went really out of his way to make sure he walked a very, very fine line there of recognizing the kind of where we started off, that there's some good in here potentially for the people of Venezuela, but that without condemning the United States, really spoke to the need for there being rule of law, for there being adherence to respecting one another's democracies, and other nations, and ultimately that there has to be some, coming back to our terminology here, some order in all of this. And so the Canadian official line right now is we're not condemning, but we're certainly not supporting. I thought it was interesting. Pierre Poilievre was very outspoken in his support for the U.S. action, and in particular, what I found really interesting is, I'm not surprised. This is sort of how he characterizes things, and but what surprised me was he had spent a lot. The biggest thing that he took on as a criticism last year during the election period, and that one could argue really lost in the election, was the fact that he was looked at as a Canadian version of Trump.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by what he said. Not that I didn't believe that this was in keeping with his character, that he was so outspoken and supportive of President Trump in doing this. And I know he has connections to Venezuela through his wife as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's maybe some personal energy in there also. But that he had spent so much time and taken so much criticism domestically for being associated as being Trump-like, that at this very sort of critical juncture for him, where his leadership is about to be reviewed and his role in Canadian politics is about to be adjudicated, to take on to make a very public statement, reassociating himself so closely with Donald Trump.
That's interesting.
I thought it was a really weird political move for him to make at a time that he has to convince his party that he is a viable candidate for prime minister, when one could argue the main reason he lost the last election is because he was too much like Trump.
Well, the irony of all of this is Trump isn't being very Trump-like.
Yeah. Fair.
because if you think about Trump 1.0, so something like this would be anathema to his base.
He was, I'm not about war, I'm not about meddling in other countries.
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
This is a neocon move.
Yeah.
This, again.
Yeah, this is Bush era stuff.
The only difference is Trump came up with a bad excuse, which is fentanyl. Yeah. And there's no evidence. Even the DEA says there's no real evidence there. Yeah. So I think what Trump has proven is that he is a neoliberal, neoconservative, like Bush, like Clinton, like everybody else. And he has just adopted this rhetoric and this posture that feels more populist, but it's in substance not. Yeah. And I think what Poilievre is doing is he's actually, it's not necessary. I agree with you. He's aligning himself with Trump, and the optics of that are one thing. But I also think, if Kamala did this, he'd say the same thing. Like this is just establishment stuff that he's aligning himself with. The real heterodox opinion here is being critical of Trump's decision to kidnap Maduro.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe let's bring a little more local in the meantime while we wait for this other bigger story to unfold.
Yes.
So we came back to a bunch of things moving around us and a lot of issues we need to jump into.
Yeah.
But the one that's most top of mind is our municipal budget.
Yeah.
And so, which is about to be released on Friday. We're recording this on Thursday, so it's going to come out tomorrow afternoon. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have an opportunity to review that, provide some comment back to the city next week on behalf of the business community. And there's some forms that are open for various special communities within Brampton, as well as just the general residents to come in, whether you're from the arts community, business community, and so forth. Your thoughts? We haven't seen the budget in full yet, but we do have some directionality as to where it's going, and any on the eve of the budget, what might you have to say?
I'll say it. It's the second year of the mayor's budget, facilitated through the strong mayor powers. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of how this budget process is unfolding. I will say I like, for some reasons, I like how the region has approached this, the budget. Months of deliberation, some debate. We went and deputed, and there was actual substantive discussion around this. Some areas of improvement include maybe some more robust consultation, which I think folks are very amenable to. when it comes to the municipal budget, the lower tier municipality, Brampton in particular, once again, we are getting a budget on the Friday of a weekend, Friday before a weekend, and we're looking to comment on the Tuesday after the weekend, right? And what that means is you and I will have to spend our weekends, combing through this several 100-page document, which I'm fine. I love doing that anyway. But when I put my sort of citizen cap on and my democracy cap on, this is not a good process.
Yeah.
This is a terrible process. It is clear that boxes are being checked in terms of consultation and town halls and whatnot. And I think, what I would prefer to see is a budget that is introduced before the holidays and that has some more robust consultation in terms of various, not just communities, but also the business community, the arts community, and which the arts community didn't have their own dedicated budget consultation last year. So kudos to the team there. But I think I would like to see a better commitment towards consultation and debate and transparency regarding the actual development of the budget. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I find this process incredibly frustrating and incredibly disappointing. Yeah. And this is completely apart from the quality of the budget that's delivered.
Absolutely.
Even if this budget delivered everything we'd wanted on our wish list and was reflective of the needs in the community and aligned with the principles that we want, I would still be incredibly frustrated with this.
Yes.
Because the point is what you're describing here.
Yeah.
A process that is done without transparency, it's done without openness, it's done without consultation, it is fraught no matter what.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get the result we need. But it's just, I can't receive this in any way other than it being insulting. It feels contemptuous. And this feels like a very slippery slope that we're going down here.
Totally.
To say, we as the council know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And we will tell you what you're going to get and you will receive it. And I understand that there is a consultation opportunity.
Yeah.
To be clear, not just is it the Tuesday after a Friday budget's going to be delivered. Again, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon at 3-ish in the afternoon. I guarantee you this budget, I'll put money down, is not going to be in our inboxes at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
No.
It's going to come, late afternoon. So it really will be a weekend read for people. We've been as proactive as we can be. And we've already booked meetings with our members on Monday to try to get as many people in the room as possible, virtually or otherwise, to give us some feedback. But you're asking a whole bunch of people now to take time out of their weekends and make that happen. How likely is that? It's just not going to get that result. We go in, our consultation is first thing Tuesday morning, but the other part of it is it's an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
There are tens of thousands of businesses in Brampton.
Yeah.
You think if you really were running a process where you said, we really want to hear and give equal opportunity to all those tens of thousands of businesses and the hundreds of thousands of people that they employ therefore, or tens of thousands of people they employ therefore, that we're going to allocate 90 minutes and we're going to have robust conversation and input and the opportunity to receive thoughts in that time frame, that's a joke.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that the folks at the arts organization are getting their consultation. They absolutely deserve to. But how many, respectfully, how many artists and art organizations and stakeholders do they have relative to the business community? I'm not saying we're more important. I'm just saying logistically.
No, exactly.
If you want to allocate them 90 minutes, then you've got to give us, some X of that over top just to give people the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I find, again, it's just an exercise in checking a box.
Yeah.
We're going to give you no time to review it. And when we engage with you, you're going to be on a clock. You're going to have no time to speak. And the majority of the people on that call are going to have to leave that call not having had their voice heard.
100%. And that happened last year, for the record. And if folks listening are wondering why you and I are so activated about this, it's because we made these comments last year. We communicated this frustration last year. And this year, the same thing has happened. And I think ideally, thank goodness that we have such an active and engaged PGR committee. Mm-hmm. And we have volunteers who are willing to spend their weekends reading this and come back to us with some commentary. ideally, how the process looks from our point of view is we have lead time to be able to proactively reach out to businesses who may not be engaged in our PGR activities to understand, okay, well, what are the implications of this tax increase on your business?
Yeah.
And how is this going to affect your bottom line? And, are you happy with XYZ line items being prioritized, and that we are potentially cutting transit service 1 to 5 minutes on certain routes? And, what are the implications of all of this? And we'd be able to collate and bring together those insights into a robust response from the Brampton business community.
Yeah.
That is ideally how the process goes. But right now, what we have is, we're going to earmark some time on Monday to just get on the same page with folks. We're going to frantically, get comments from people. And then Tuesday, we're going to have a series of questions. And as you said, 90 minutes is going to go by and not everyone's going to have their voice heard.
Yeah.
And that to me is not only a missed opportunity, but my goodness, especially in an election year, this is something that we elect our politicians to prioritize, is robust engagement.
Listening.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. So maybe I missed something and got busy with other stuff. Have you seen anything? Like, how did you know that there's a budget consultation next week?
You forwarded me an email,
right?
That from Eventbrite,
yeah,
because we attended last year.
That's right. So I got an invitation on, I think, on the Monday that there's going to be this consultation, and I've been invited to attend.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything else
advertised.
Yeah. When I went to the link that was on the invitation, the city's budget website, because I was just looking for some more information in general to pass along to you so we could share it with our members. Mm-hmm. The page had not yet been updated to indicate when the sessions were, just that sessions were coming. Mm-hmm. So again, just to add on to all this, the lack of providing information in advance, the lack of pre-consultation, the very short window to turn around in reflection, and then short turnaround for feedback, and then how many people even know that this is happening?
Yeah.
Most people are not even going to be aware, because again, I'm not on top of everything, but it's my job to know these things. I would think in my day-to-day work, being an existing human being living in Brampton, I would have gotten something in the mail. I would have seen something on a billboard. I would have seen some sign. When we're not allowed to put out fireworks on Diwali, there's signs all over town.
Yeah.
When there's something happening, for Canada Day in Chinguacousy Park, there's signs all over town. When waste pickup is moved back a day because of some statutory holiday, there's signs all over town.
Yeah.
You think we'd be telling people, hey, the municipal budget's going to come out. We really want to hear your opinion. There'd be a few signs around town, but to see nothing. I only know because I'm on a mailing list, and to find out that you didn't know, other than for me to forward it to you, is that again is just another indicator that and let's take out the any sort of moral judgment here. This is just a process that is broken.
Yes,
and I will let other people determine what the reasons for that are. I don't want to assign blame to anybody, but let's accept at minimum this is a broken process. And for council not to recognize that and to address that is just a failure in my mind in terms of engagement with the community on the piece that matters most. Because for the majority of us as residents and businesses operating in the city, our primary form of engagement with the city is the remittance of our tax dollars. With the understanding as part of that covenant that those funds, those monies that we provide, are utilized in a responsible and an effective way. And if you can't operate with the transparency in that area, then it doesn't matter what else you're doing everywhere else. Everything else is just show. I gave you the money. I trust you to do something good with it. Tell me what you're going to do with it. I don't feel like that's too much to ask.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it feels like it just exacerbates disengagement with the process and with civic culture in general. And, if I had the funding and the capacity to do this, I'd love to comb through the last year's Committee of Council and City Council meetings, because I attend most of them. And there were a few occasions where there was a budget amendment requested. And I'm happy to say this, Councillor Tour is very good at articulating his disdain towards budget amendments, because we pass a budget for a reason, and we shouldn't have to amend it midway through the year, right? The number one way you get around that or address that is you have robust consultation before you pass a budget. When a budget is passed in closed session, like that is essentially a dictated budget.
Yeah,
it's not a democratic budget. So anyway, we'll see tomorrow what comes out of this. But.
And this podcast will be released tomorrow, Josh. So it'll go out before the budget consultation happens.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this in advance of next Tuesday, the 13th, and you've got something to say and you can't make it out there, reach out to Vijay or I and let us know. And one of the things that we'll be working on very diligently over the next couple of days is trying to compile as much of the feedback we receive into a deputation we can take to the budget meeting. Which again, if I'm not going to let it go, that's in the morning on a business day. Again, how many people can take time off of work to be part of that? If you want to do this, do the daytime one. There should be a nighttime session too for those people who can't take time away from their business. But fortunately, that's what we at the Board of Trade are here to do. We work full time on this, and so if you've got something to say on this topic, even if you disagree with us, let us know, and we can make sure that commentary is included in the submission that we make to the city next week as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Want to do something lighter?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we as a sort of a fun, silly story, the Premier's phone is apparently about to get exposed.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a fun little moment of hubris at the province, to believe that just because he uses his personal phone for work purposes that people can't that's safe from a Freedom of Information Act. But it appears as though giving away your phone number at every event and using it exclusively for all business you do makes your personal phone a work phone.
Yeah.
And the Freedom of Information Act, a request rather, filed by, I believe it was Global News, looks like is gaining some steam here. And there might be some insight into who the Premier talks to about what.
It is hilarious, honestly.
It's hilarious.
It's funny because we've done a number of events with Premier Ford since at least 2018, maybe even before that. He's been very ready to give out his personal phone number.
I wrote down the number. I put it in my phone.
Exactly.
I technically have Doug Ford in my phone.
Yeah, there you go. You might show up in this FOI, so careful. But yeah, it's hilarious because it's this sort of folksy kind of thing about him, is that he gives out his personal phone number. He clearly does all of his business on his personal phone. And I don't know, he kind of shot himself in the foot, if I'm being honest. He thought this was like maybe a loophole to get around some of the less savory conversations, maybe. But we'll see if his challenge goes anywhere. It seems unlikely. And I think what's interesting about this is, again, it's not quite the American example that we talked about earlier, but with Premier Ford in particular, but not just the PCs. I think this has been a trend for a little bit in the province, but there was a level of a lack of decency, or maybe just kind of getting around the rules a little bit, that we sort of accepted. And
a bending, a softening,
a softening, exactly. And I think this, plus maybe the SDF, plus maybe a few others, it's starting to feel like we're turning the tide a little bit towards better forbearance in this province, but also you gotta play by the rule book. And I'm actually very encouraged to see something like this. Because when you don't speak truth to power and you don't challenge those who are in power, you end up with a Trump. I'm not saying Premier Ford is a Trump. I'm just saying the next premier or the next prime minister will maybe not have the same level of decency as those who came before them. So.
No, and I think that's the piece that I think bears repeating and being thoughtful about on any of the topics we spoke about so far, right? Whether you're talking about what happened with Maduro, whether you're talking about how strong mayor powers are being exercised, we are always assuming that
Yeah.
these people who make decisions and are in positions of power in our societies are individuals who are operating according to norms, but that also have a certain moral uprightness.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a word, but that we can hold them accountable to.
Yeah.
But every time that gets eroded, even a little bit, and there's no consequence to it, it just makes it easier for the next and the next and the next.
Exactly.
And at some point, even if the individual you have in that position right now is operating with the best of intention and with the best of moral integrity, by creating these processes where there is no accountability, then all you need is for the next person to come in to not have that same standard, and the whole house of cards falls apart.
Yeah.
And that's my concern, whether you're talking about how we're policing the actions of the United States in the global sphere or how we're passing budgets here in Brampton.
Yeah.
Ultimately, these are just erosions of the underpinning of what holds the whole thing together. And you're right, to see that there is some accountability, at least trying to be exercised, and seeing a court agree that there's merit to the request to see what the premier is doing, I think is wonderful to see.
Absolutely. That was a good tie-in between the global and the local.
There you go.
Well done.
I made it happen.
You did it.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And we should also mention that Premier Ford's defense is that private citizens, Ontarians will have their personal information exposed as a result of this FOI.
He's protecting us now.
Yeah. The legislation specifically protects from that happening.
Yeah.
So that I don't think is a ironclad defense, but yeah, it's interesting. And in general, I think FOIs, or the Freedom of Information requests, they're a good thing, and we've utilized them in our work to get some insight that wasn't publicly available. So again, I think the project for this year for us is encourage a good civic culture and civic engagement, get people, figure out ways to not necessarily get everyone to behave like us, where we comb through 100-page budgets, but find an accessible way for people to get informed and get engaged in the process. And this being an election year, I'm really looking forward to doing that work.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great segue into looking forward then, right? So 2026 is an election year.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really, really exciting opportunity for us to not even have influence on the outcome of the election in so much as there's a candidate.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now with complete certainty, that I don't intend for the Board of Trade to be endorsing anybody.
No.
Which
we have done in the past.
Which we have done in the past. And quite frankly, I don't, unless there's something changes seismically in the landscape, I don't believe that that's a responsible approach for us to be taking. I do think, however, it's our responsibility to ensure what you're describing here, that there is as much transparency and understanding of those individuals, what they stand for, and the issues on which they're running, in order for people to make a good decision for our community. And I think in that regard, we should be very bulldogged in this coming year. And I'm really excited. I know you've struck, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, how you're engaging our membership and some of our volunteers into that effort, in particular, in case it inspires anyone listening to this to want to put up their own hand and get involved in what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, the details will iron out over the course of the next few weeks, but I'm really looking to mobilize some of the volunteers we have engaged through PGR and elsewhere to be present at some of our events where we do get to meet hundreds of people and intersect with thousands of businesses to share the fact that we are indeed in an election year, that an election is happening in October, and this is how you can get involved. And that, did you know we're doing candidate debates, and did you know that we're providing communication around platforms and things like that. And we have a newsletter, The Advocate.
Yeah.
But we're looking to really have dedicated communication around the election that can meet people where they are, and it can show up in your inbox, and you can engage with that material in a way that makes sense to you. And we want to make it as easy and as accessible as we can. But we also want to provide the connection point to come out to an event, to be able to speak your mind, to engage with issues around housing and workforce and transit, that are so important to us that is validated through our business confidence index survey. But how does that translate to a municipal context, right? And for years, I think the municipal landscape has been dictated by candidates themselves. I would love for this year to be dictated by constituents.
The voters,
right?
Absolutely.
I would love those vying for these positions of power to be responsive to the agenda set by the people. So that's my vision for this year. And if you want to get involved, you want to receive that communication or volunteer your time, reach out to me at vsingh@bramptonbot.com.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. And to reiterate, like our intention is not to put a thumb on the scale here, but is to really try to shine a light. Might be the appropriate analogy to use. And to your point, utilizing our business confidence index survey, but just as much so, through our own engagement with members, with voters, with constituents, understanding what issues are driving them to make the decision they want, in terms of the decision on who they want, rather. And doing the best we can, therefore, to help educate people as to how to best make that choice.
Absolutely.
And I think it's going to be really fascinating because, to your point, utilizing some of the tools that we have available to us to make that happen, whether it be in terms of volunteerism, some of the great subject matter experts that we have, freedom of information, utilizing that tool to understand how things are working presently. I think it's going to be a really, really fun year for the Board of Trade. I think it's really going to do a lot to shape the conversations, quite frankly, we're having on this podcast over the year to come. Because as we go through this, and start to learn about those issues, and then in soon enough time, learn who those candidates are, who putting their name forward, I think it's going to be a really, really dominant part of the dialogue we're going to be having in the months to come.
I'm excited.
Yeah, as am I. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. So as we look to wrap this up, maybe we could talk a little bit about something we observed or watched or consumed, a piece of media. Maybe throughout the holidays. You made quick mention of it, but you saw one battle after another. I talked about it a few episodes ago. Do you want to take some time to talk about your reflections there? Or?
Sure. I mean, or
anything else.
You know what? Honestly, so I got around to watching it. I absolutely loved it. I understand what the hype is about. It's a fascinating movie that I'm so happy is on streaming because I need to watch it again. And reabsorb it. But in terms of, and it's amazing sometimes, how a movie, like this is the gift of a great filmmaker or great artist in general, that the art that they produce captures the moment so well, but you recognize, particularly with something like film, because of the long lead time it takes to put something like that together, that isn't Paul Thomas Anderson responding to the moment. That's Paul Thomas Anderson seeing something that was coming and releasing it in the moment. And that's what blew me away. It's like, that movie feels like right now, but he's clearly been working on it for like 4 years. So my goodness, that's an incredible ability to see pieces and understand the human condition really, really well. It's a fantastic movie. I loved how, again, it sort of captured this time that we're in right now where it's hard to put, and I say this not because I'm struggling for the words, it's the point of the movie, in fact. It hit me about a third of the way through the movie. It's a movie about a fellow who's a revolutionary, part of a militia who is sort of pushing back at Big Brother, and I use that word purposely because I'm going to get to the why in a moment, and sort of where he was 15, 16 years ago, and then to the present day, and sort of how his life has changed through the birth of his daughter, and some of the consequences of his actions coming back to him. And because I don't want to give away the plot too much. But what I thought was amazing in there is that it took me a good chunk of the movie to realize I don't know who the bad guy in this movie is. Not in terms of the characters, but like they are actually quite. He goes to great lengths to not actually make it clear who they're ever fighting. Who are they pushing back against? Is it the government? Is it some occupying force? Is it the state? Is it the federal? It's really capturing, I feel like, this moment that we're in, therefore, as a result, where we're not really sure who the enemy is. We know that there are certain actors out there that are creating chaos in the world. Who am I upset with? Is it my neighbor? Is it someone who just looks different than me? Is it someone whose politics are different than mine? I feel like there's this tension that we have right now, and part of our anxiety as a whole is because we know the world isn't working. And I think you've done a great job of articulating among the reasons why we're in this sort of liminal area between eras, between orders. and therefore things are almost chaotic inevitably. And that movie captures that energy, I feel like, that we've got like right now. That paranoia that the lead character, that DiCaprio's character, is going through, is he's never really sure himself what's happening. He's always reacting and trying to make sense of things as they're unfolding. And that, the only way through it for him, for that particular character, is a very personal solution and a very personal mission, because the larger mission of what motivated him initially is so difficult and impossible to wrap himself around. But the reason I want to talk about it in part was I finally got around to watch that movie. But the other thing I finally got around to watching in full was Andor. And I love the Star Wars universe, and I love everything that goes along with it. And this, to me, is the single best thing that's been produced associated with the Star Wars name. That I don't have the inherent, like, just
nostalgia.
I grew up watching Star Wars, 47 times a year and all that kind of stuff. But this particular show captures, and for those who aren't Star Wars nerds, the quick recap is there's a lot of stuff that happens in the movies that really captures the impact of the rebellion, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and their crazy crew, and how they bring down the Intergalactic Empire, which is led by Darth Vader and the Emperor and all this sort of stuff. I'm grossly oversimplifying because I don't want to bore anyone with Star Wars lore, and that's the larger story of the movies, underpinned by ideas like the Force and connections between beings and all the mythology that is Star Wars. But the stuff that happens interstitially in between the movies is where a lot of these TV shows have chosen to explore the universe at a deeper level. And among the things that Andor really dives into is well, where did this revolution start from? And there's this throwaway line in the original Star Wars movie that people nowadays refer to as A New Hope, where the plans to destroy the Death Star were acquired at great cost. And that one line has turned into a whole other movie in the form of Rogue One, and 2 series of this show Andor, which is, what was that great cost? How did this revolution come together? And what price had to be paid for people to start this revolution? And having watched Andor and One Battle After Another within the same week, my head could not help but draw all the parallels. And I almost wish I was like back in first year university, because this is a great paper to write for some media course I might have been in. But this notion of One Battle After Another is all the energy of how a revolution starts. And this idea that it's personal. And that the world isn't working for me and I need to push back on it in some way. And Andor is all about what it takes for that personal energy to be turned into a movement. And where One Battle After Another stops, those characters, and I don't want to ruin the movie for anybody, their movement does not fully fulfill what it is that they thought it was going to be. It kind of gets paused. But Andor is all about how this a couple of individuals have to make the personal sacrifice, have to stop making the issue a personal one and turn it into a movement. These things don't start with big speeches. They start when people are upset and are afraid and the world doesn't work for them. And eventually it becomes a thing that we can put a word to, put a name to, put money into, put resource into, and turn into a movement of some kind. And in that first phase, the enemy is vague and misunderstood. And by the second phase, it's very clear who it is. It's a big guy in a black cape and a lightsaber, and we know what we're doing here. And those two pieces of media just fit together so well. And A, I loved it, but B, it's really hard for me not to connect it to where we are right now. And thinking about, the one issue we haven't talked about, I think at all, even since you and I have been back, is what's happening with the protests at Queen's Park, for instance, right now. And all these individuals who have been disenfranchised by decisions being made by the government that have left them without status in this country, who have come here at great cost to start a life in Canada, can't get jobs, are now being pushed out. And that tension, everything's been peaceful thus far, everything has been well behaved thus far, but there's an anger. There's an anger coming from them about a government that let them down. But what I also see coming is that there's an anger from other Canadians who are angry at these people for taking jobs, for taking up time, for daring to protest. And we're hearing that tension already in places like social media. Go back home to your country. We need to make these jobs for Canadians again. We need to reduce immigration, not for economic reasons, but for reasons that are more tied to the culture and the future of our country. There's a real tension and this sense of revolution here that in watching this media, and there might be a real recency bias, but in watching these two things, I couldn't help but feel like we're sitting on this powder keg right now in this country, and our issue is not rebels in the Galactic Empire or these this militia and whatever this sort of vague force they're fighting. It's about what does immigration and what it means to be Canadian, particularly in the backdrop of our identity on a global level being challenged. I think is really the fight that's going to happen this year, and I think it's going to get ugly. I think it's going to start in social media, but I do think it's going to become a real thing. And I think these peaceful protests of primarily young people, of immigrants in our downtown Toronto right now who are trying to have their voices heard, as they become louder because they're going to become more frustrated, the pushback will also become louder, and I fear it'll become forceful. And I really feel like it's hard to not see, in my eyes at least, the inevitability that this is going to become something much uglier.
Wow.
So that's what watching Star Wars does for me.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. That's incredible.
How about you?
Yeah. I honestly don't think I can.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on a 10-minute diatribe about that.
That's fantastic.
This is the first time I had to be truthful. This is the first time I've had to talk to anybody about this sort of connecting these two ideas together, and how it relates in my mind to how I'm seeing these protesters in our community.
I don't watch a lot of Star Wars. I actually haven't seen any of the new stuff, and I really should, because this is exactly the kind of media that gets my brain going, and I love world building and this sort of thing. So I've been thinking a lot about this issue too, and I completely agree with you, and I think we should absolutely, think about resistance more, especially as a business organization, and what the implication of that is on broader society. Because we think about other things that relate to society, the conditions that make for good business, right? Affordable housing, good transit, all of these things, but also unrest, civil unrest is part of that, right? And I've been thinking a lot about Canada, and the fact that, in my mind, we are not a revolutionary society. Plenty of resistance. We have a long history of resistance, my goodness, but we've not had a true revolution. We hear about the common sense revolution. That's not a real revolution, right? And this really was underscored when I was in France, and I was at the lunch table at the OECD, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of Europeans, and they all ask me about Canada. And they say, like, do you folks have an Independence Day? And and I said, well, we kind of sort of do.
We protest our own Independence Day.
Exactly. Yes. That's a good way to put it. But no, it's Confederation, which was sort of this decision based on convenience more than anything else. And then there was a long history. It wasn't until the 80s that we actually had full independence from the UK, and they just couldn't understand that, because all of their societies have been formed out of this crucible of resistance, struggle, revolution, bloodshed. And here's Canada that's all about okay, what's pragmatic, right? And I think that has translated to just our culture in general, which is one of maintaining peace. Right? And we're an incredibly legalistic society in the way that the US is legalistic, but the US is legalistic because this freedom is the centerpiece of their society, right? The American Revolution was all about freedom from, right? And not freedom to have anything. It's freedom. It's these negative freedoms, right? The Isaiah Berlin idea, right? Whereas China is about engineering. Everything is an engineering problem, including the matters of the soul, right? Which is a whole different sort of discussion. But Canada is very much it's legalistic because we want to maintain peace and order and quell anxiety. So when I answered earlier around what is the path forward for Canada in this incredibly anxiety-ridden state that we're in as a globe, I think part of it is, what is our identity while we're surrounded by indecency? Right now we're trying to be decent in an indecent time, but maybe this is the time that we can take big risks and be bold and try crazy ideas and figure out what our path is. Like this is the time to do that, because right now we're trying to harken back to 20 years ago. that'll never be the case again.
Yeah.
So let's figure out what the path forward is.
Yeah, and I appreciate you drawing, like, spelling it out in that way, because that to me resonates so much with this tension that I see right now, and not just in the context that we're talking about socially, but like even in our day jobs as within the Board of Trade and supporting businesses. That tension of what it is to be a newcomer or an immigrant in Canada is that tension we see of wanting systems to work differently.
Yes.
Wanting to be disruptive, wanting to drive innovation in ways that the Canadian business culture traditionally has not been. I always sort of associate with like our mercantile roots, right? Like we're selling natural resources. And we will forever have trees and water. How innovative do we have to be? Yeah. And I always associated with that. Like that's where our certain like small c conservatism came from.
Yes.
But maybe there's some truth to that. But what you're saying really highlights to me where the tension is now is, well, the people who are coming into this country and who are starting businesses now and starting organizations now and partaking in our economy now are not coming with that conservative mindset.
They're from fundamentally
They're coming
different.
here to be revolutionary.
Yes, exactly.
Because they've come from places of revolution.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you do it that way? And then you see that piece of like, why do we see people who've started businesses in this country get frustrated and go back to wherever they came from? Citing things like red tape, the slowness at which things move, the lack of support, the lack of investment. Well, yeah, because we don't think in terms of revolution, we think in terms of maintaining order.
Exactly.
And when you maintain order, well then you're very reluctant to invest money. You're very reluctant to push IP to its limits. You're very reluctant to put your neck out there.
Yeah.
And interesting. I hadn't made that connection, but that's a strong one.
There you go. Yeah.
I like that. Okay, food for thought.
Yeah.
All right, should we wrap this one up?
I think we should, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, first one in 2026 in the books.
Yes.
Appreciate everyone who took time to listen, and we'll see you back in a couple weeks.
See you next time.
All right, take care.